Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Life Origami podcast, where we do a series of interviews in the current series and talking about how to make 2021 count for the business you love. Today, we have a guest that is already 13 years in entrepreneurship. He is a computer programmer that believes that we should be building our passion rather than pursuing building the business from our passion. That's a very interesting topic we will be discovering today. He bootstrapped multiple 7- and 6-figure online businesses. He's a speaker, a podcaster, and a just fantastic, energetic person. Ray, give your intro, please.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me on. So, I'm calling in from Mexico today, and I'm kind of excited to have a few days off for the holidays. I usually work all year round, about 50, 60 hours a week. So an excuse to take off 2 or 3 days doesn't come around that often. So I'm kind of excited.
I bet, especially when you're building multiple businesses at the same time. All right.
I'm launching two new ones in January, right? So this is kind of my calm before the storm.
Super. Well, we'll get a couple of notes about them as well in today's talk. So today's interview is divided in several processes where we talk about life balance, goals, business, self-awareness, and much more to get people to know what are you about, what is your business about, as well as get some golden nuggets about what was your journey like and some wisdom and practices that help you to actually be productive as you are, right? I believe that's not an easy task to run multiple businesses at the same time. You need a powerful foundation for that. You need a support network, and we're going to talk all about that today. So, Ray, tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from.
Yeah, so where I'm from is a little, most people say, oh, that's an easy question. I was born here and I grew up here. Yeah, no, that's not with me. So let's see, I was born in the Philippines. My mom's from the Philippines. My dad's from the United States, but he grew up in Africa, in Rhodesia. It's called Zimbabwe now. And I grew up in Istanbul, Turkey. So from 0 to 15 years of age, I lived in Istanbul, Turkey, high school and college. And then I moved into computer programming, did some work. And finally, I ended up moving to Mexico where I met my wife, and I've been living for the last 10 years. So I have multiple passports. I have never lived in one country for more than a little over a decade. So
wow.
I call myself American because that's what I sound like when I speak English.
Wow. That's a truly international background, right? So in terms of keeping productive, right, and having that kind of international business going on, how do you find yourself in the realm of being a night person or a morning person?
I am lightly a morning person. I'm not going to, there's some people who are much more extreme, right? They're like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I get everything done, or I stay up until 3 a.m. and I get everything done. I'm nothing that extreme. I go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6 every day.
Wow. Okay. It's a stable ritual.
It is for me. I have an 11-month. He doesn't quite appreciate it as much before, but for years I have been on that almost exactly. I'm not even tired until 9:55, and then at 10 o'clock I fall asleep. I mean, wow. My body's that, and I don't need an alarm to wake up at 6 a.m. My body, if I try sleeping in, I'll make it to 6:30.
Was there something that got you to this regime, or was it a natural transition, or how did that happen?
It was a natural transition, but it's very conscious right now. I am very much a person of habit and rituals. I mean, I do the same things every night before I go to bed. I do the same thing. I have a ritual in the morning. If you've ever read The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, I don't do all of it, but I do certain parts of it. I have a ritual every morning that I go through, which involves a little bit of meditation. I write my manifesto. And then I do a few stretching exercises, partially for health, partially because I have chronic back problems. It's a nice to start the day by loosening up your back, right? But going into this ritual every morning, and when I go to bed, it's the same thing. I always read an hour of science fiction or fantasy novels before going to bed, not business books. So I'm not trying to get my mind activated at that point. I'm trying to kind of tell my body, it's time to relax. It's time to go to bed. This is some kind of thing, brainless thing that, helps me relax, that I enjoy, that's not work related. I do that every single night. Doesn't matter if it's the weekend or the weekday. I always read 1 hour before going to bed every single night. And that helps my body. Your body remembers that stuff, right? It trains it. You wake up. It knows that you read for an hour. It's time to go to bed. I don't have to tell my body that. And it knows 6 a.m. You wake up. So
interesting.
Yeah, I've been doing this for years.
About reading, like basically you finish up the whole day. So even like, let's look at the regime in terms of achieving that system, right?
Mhm.
To be able to go to sleep at 9, you need to finish up the work, finish up the house stuff, finish with your kids and everything, all the things in at the house and in the work. How do you do that? How do you manage?
We build our life around that. So to
Mm,
clarify, me and my wife work together, right? In Live Lingua. I have other businesses she's not involved in, but we work together at Live Lingua. That's a slight advantage we have because we plan our days around each other. Part of the discussions of the work-life balance that people always talk about, but I don't think there's much of a separation. And especially when you work with your spouse, there is no separation. There is no we're at work. We work at home. So when am I at the office? When am I at work? I talk to my wife about work. I talk to my work about life. It's the same thing. It's all part of my life.
mm,
So that helps a lot. The hack that I have for you, especially with a child, that's like the big unknown. They don't read my Google Calendar. They don't know, that he doesn't really care about those kind of things. We move to countries where we can afford to hire help. So if I lived in the United States or in the UK or something like that, doing a lot of this stuff would not be feasible. But if you move to Latin America or even parts of Europe that are cheaper and you're still able to make an income from your main country, you can hire a nanny, you can hire, a cook, you can hire people to help you around the house, which give you the freedom
mhm.
to work on where your time is most valuably spent, right? My time is not most valuably spent making dinner. I'm a mediocre cook. I mean, I can fry a steak and boil some rice, but I'm a mediocre cook. We have somebody who helps us do that, and that gives us
Mm.
the freedom to have more control over our schedule.
Very interesting. We'll get into a little bit of self-care and habits while we move on. Let's talk about passion, right? So you are building a business that you're super passionate about, and tell us, what is it? And there, one part of the question was like, what keeps you up at night? But you have a regime. 10 o'clock, dead end. It's night. It's sleep. So tell us about what gets you engaged during the day, what gets you pumped up, and what gets you to wake up 6 a.m. and love life.
I love what I do. So, and this is, we had the pre-interview and we were talking about this before. My passion is not necessarily the product, right? It's not what I'm selling. It's the process of creating a business out of whatever this product is. So, my main business, livelingua.com, is one of the world's largest online language schools. I enjoy learning languages, but I would never say I'm passionate about it. My wife is. She's a language teacher, and she's my business partner there. But I love the creativity of building this business. I built Twiducate. It's a social network for schools. Same thing. It was just about the journey of building it. The way I describe it is like we talked about. It's not following your passion. None of these were my passion. It was building your passion. Become good at something, and that becomes your passion. And that's what kind of gets me up every morning. I think, and I'm no psychologist, the reason behind it is I come from a family of academics and artists. So, they were all about writing books or painting or, making music and all the rest of it. I'm the black sheep. I'm an engineer, right? I mean, I just totally went out of there but I still think I have some of that in me. So I studied engineering and that's what I did it. And then I found business and I found that this is my canvas. Email funnels is one of my paints, and SEO is another one, and computer engineering to build websites are different mediums I can use to create this piece of art, which happens to generate an income. So that's what I do. That's kind of what I love doing. I tell people I would build an e-commerce store that sold, donkeys. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. As long as I think the business would work, I would have fun doing it, even though I am not passionate about donkeys at all. They're fine. I'm like, I don't care. So
That's an interesting look. As you say, we've talked about this idea, and one of the things I was also looking at, like business is a tool for self-realization, right? And when we were talking, and the idea you're sharing is that not building a business around your passion, but what if you are? What if the process is your passion? And it doesn't matter what business it is, but the process is the passion, right? So it really doesn't matter what is the nuance, like as we've discussed, like the idea that it doesn't matter from a perspective that you are, for example, as you gave, like a tennis person, right? And you build a business around tennis, and not necessarily you need to be a business person to achieve that and all that ideas. But what if your core passion is actually putting together a process of building a business and seeing that business succeed?
Absolutely. The difference however, of following a passion and building a passion is that wasn't my passion when I started. It wasn't that I love building businesses, let me go out and do it. I think other people, though, saw that in me when I was a kid, because I was that kid. If you'd asked anybody when I was 10, all my classmates, 10, 12, 15, 18 years old, who's going to run a business, they'd all say Ray. That wasn't even on my radar. It didn't even, I was like, no, what are you talking about? I'm going to study computer programming and I'm going to be a computer programmer. I'm going to make computer games. I later on discovered that making computer games is not that much fun. I mean, it's fun to play, but it's not fun to actually do. But I think so that kernel was in me, but I had to actually build it in order for me to kind of come to that self-realization that that was my passion. If I had never followed entrepreneurship would never have become a passion for me, right? Becoming passionate about anything takes work. Even if you like something, it's not really a passion yet until you become good at it, in my opinion. I've never been passionate about something I'm awful at. I mean, you've never seen that really bad painter, and I'm one of them, being passionate about painting, or at least they think they're a really good painter. At least they might be a bad one, but at least in their own mind, they're a really good one. That's a requirement for being, for having passion in something. So I think you have to work for it. That's one of the reasons I think a lot of people who follow their passion fall down and don't get back up again, because they realize that, okay, it was a passion in this part of my life, in my personal life, right? It's a hobby. I love this, but it's not a passion in this other part of my life, which is work. Because, again, tennis playing, let's go to it. I love playing tennis. I'm really good at playing tennis, but building a tennis business is not about you playing tennis all day. It's about you doing accounting and marketing and running staff and all the rest of it. You might not be passionate about that, and tennis becomes a chore. Playing tennis becomes a chore because you have all this other stuff around it that's just killing your passion for tennis, because you're like, oh, I got to market it. Now I got to take a video of myself playing tennis. So I think people look at it the wrong way. You can have passions in different parts of your life, and some passions are better kept in those silos, right? In those personal,
in a hobby
business
silo, right?
In the hobby silo, exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. I believe that for many who are hearing this idea right now, they need to recalibrate, especially in 2021. What is their hobby and what should be their, let's so call it, business or a private practice or being self-employed in some direction, and evaluate what do you have to do in the business and in the tasks that you want to engage into, like actually discovering what it takes to do that, right, in the first place, and understanding, do you see yourself there in 5 or 10 years doing that same thing as a routine? That's a beautiful remark there. Let's talk about the businesses that you've built up, and how did you find yourself in there? One of them is the language school. That was your wife's passion, and you helped her to build that out. What else do you do?
Okay, so our biggest business was, we've actually built 2 language schools with my wife. The first one was a chain of brick and mortar language schools in Mexico. So that's how we started, right? I'm a computer engineer, but for some reason, building an online business was not the first thing that occurred to me when we launched business. It was more traditional. Let's rent a building and let's, put furniture in there and hire staff and all the rest of it. So that's the first business we did. It was successful. We sold that in 2012. The second business we launched was livelingua.com. We launched this while we were running the brick and mortar school as well, so there was some overlap, and we've still been running that now for going on 13 years. We are, number 3 language school in the world. We're the only one that does not have at least $10 million in venture capital. All of our competitors have at least $10 million in investment.
Wow.
We bootstrapped for $59.99. That's how much we invested to start our business. How
long have you been growing that for?
We've been growing that now for 13 years. So that's the reason we're able to compete, right? We're the kind of slow. We don't need to be like a lot of those companies that invest, they come, we've had a lot of people come and go, over the years, right? They get 5, 10 million, they come up, they're bigger than us, and then they disappear because they're not growing at the speed their investors want. If somebody invested $20 million, you better be making them back $200 million. Otherwise, they're not happy, right? They're not looking to make back $21 million.
How long, like for the perspective, so everyone out there understands like what it truly takes in amount of time to build a sustainable, long-term, profitable business. Tell us the time frame where that happened.
Great question. And I'll start with another question people ask me all the time. They ask me, Ray, you should write a book on how to bootstrap location independent online businesses, right? Something that allows you to travel and make a good income. And I jokingly tell people that, yeah, if I wrote the book, it would be called 7 Figures in 7 Years. And nobody would buy it because it took us exactly 7 years to make this a 7-figure business. Now, 7-figure does not mean net. We did not make, we still don't take home 7 figures a year in profit, but to grow 7 figures, it took us 7 years to bootstrap up to that. It was a long slog. We worked every day. It took about 5 years to get to the point where we were making more money than we would have made working for somebody else. I'm a computer engineer. My wife's a bilingual teacher. If we went back to the US, we'd probably be making multi-6 figures. I programmer probably 150 grand and my wife would make 60, 70 as a teacher. It took us, 5 years to make that more than that, working the business. So for those 5 years, we made less than we would have made working for somebody else in a stable job. That's a lot of my friends who have built similar businesses and they bootstrapped it or started with very little investment, they have similar stories. And if you even look at some of the big ones like Facebook and Apple and all the rest of it, it sounds like they were overnight successes, but you read like the timeline on those and, really, Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook when he was in college and we didn't even hear about it for like 12 years later. I mean, it didn't become a household name for another decade. So it was just like bit by bit and they did get investment. So it would have taken even longer for them to get up there. But even with millions and hundreds of millions in investment, it took us 10 years before we were talking about Facebook, in our homes. So I think that's another reason why people lose it because there's too many marketers out there selling build your $1 million e-commerce dropship store in 30 days. And that's what people expect and it doesn't work.
Yet it's possible, right? There are systems and if you got what it takes, right, it's a matter of as well, what is your potential and knowing yourself, having that self-awareness, do you have the needed skills to pull that off? And it's possible to build that and then grow a business, make money, and then potentially in time, if something goes bad, pivot and do something else. But that demands understanding what's your core talent, right?
And it also constant self-improvement. There are actually studies out there that show that, this level of success in business has almost a direct correlation to the level of time that people put into self-improvement. You'll never find, I don't know the study, but you can Google it. Anybody can just Google it online. They've actually done the studies of how many hours top CEOs read new business books or take new courses versus somebody who doesn't. And it's not even close. And they've done this across all these different fields. The top doctors take more training, the top in any field, they take more training and they study and they self-improve. That's one of the things you need. And just like building a business, that takes time. You're not going to go away for a weekend and learn everything there is to know about marketing, business, accounting, all the rest of it. You have to just every week. I'm no Bill Gates who reads a book every hour or something like that, but I read a new business book, complete a new business book every week and a half to 2 weeks. And I've been doing it for 6 or 7 years now. So you kind of do the math and most of the famous ones I've read, some of the unknown ones I've read. And I even start reading now books that aren't even business because to build your business, you can actually expand your knowledge in other areas. I just read a book on like the basic astrophysics for people who don't have time by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I just finished that. Absolutely nothing to do with business, but it's I'm trying to improve myself by learning more.
How do you keep you read 1 hour before going to sleep. Do you optimize the time to read a book through listening or you just read?
No, I listen generally for the business books. I listen. So I work out every day. I do go to the gym and I'm usually listening to a book because if anybody's worked out, it's usually go hard for 30 seconds to a minute and then take 1 or 2 minutes break in between. That's the time when you can be listening to your book. So you kind of optimize your time in order to do it. I have an app on my phone, just a little notepad, and I just write down little notes from the book that I hear so I can go back to it. Because I'll be honest, if you're listening to a book while you're at the gym, you're not going to get all the details, right? My idea is just to get a general overview of the concept. And if I like anything specifically, I'll go and listen to it again when I'm back in the house and take notes about it. I'm like,
So
that was
you
really
take
good. I need
small
the
notes
details.
of where to go back and
That's
then
it.
re-listen. That's really
exactly
good.
it. I'm like, okay, chapter 3, minute 43 seconds into it. Go back and listen to that part again. It's about 30 seconds long. And I put a little note. It's about
that's
this.
a nice hack. That's a nice hack.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's the two businesses. What else are you doing?
So I have a lot of small side businesses that, don't make more than $100, $200 a month, and I just keep them running. But the two main things that I'm working on right now is I'm launching two businesses. I alluded to it before in January, one on purpose, one by accident. So I'll start with the accidental business. So I'm launching an e-commerce store in January, selling products to make for your toilet. So toilet seats, toilets, bathroom, toilet paper holders, scales, all the rest of it. This happened by accident. So what happened was I have a network of entrepreneurs I know. I've been mentoring some people, and one of the kids that I'm calling him a kid because he's like 18, but one of the ones I was in touch with, he created a calculator back in March called howmuchtoiletpaper.com, which just told people how much toilet paper they needed to survive COVID, right? He was like, this was just a joke. He just threw it up there and he did it. It went viral. It got 15 million visits in the month of March. 15 million people. Crashed the server. He was interviewed by I think it's called Cloudcast. It's one of those CDN content distribution networks, right? Because they helped his website survive. They gave him like free service. It would have cost him like $20,000, $50,000 just to keep it up and running with the number of traffic, but just for marketing. They're like, we'll do it for you for free. Just have us on your show and talk about it, right? And in that time, it got thousands of people linking to it. For those of you who aren't familiar with what links mean, in online business, a link is a vote, and the more votes you have, the higher you rank in Google. It's something called search engine optimization. He got more links to that website than I built to Live Lingua in 10 years in 30 days. So, I was talking to him and he's like, he has a job with a Fortune 50 company when he graduates. And he's like, I don't really have time to build a business. I have a great job coming up. And what do I do with this? I'm like, I'll pay you for it. It made no money, right? So most people would not buy it, but I'm like, oh, I can put a business on there. You have the SEO. I just need to put a business on there. And so I spent about 3 months thinking, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And then eventually I came to, hey, I've always wanted to try e-commerce. So let's put up a toilet store, a store with how much toilet paper. It had to be in the toilet somewhere. And so I'm like, let's throw that up there. So the e-commerce store is launching in January, and we're going to be selling primarily smart toilet products. So smart toilet seats, smart scales, smart mirrors, smart trash cans. They have all this stuff now for your, for your bathroom. So we're going to be selling it there. That launches in January. That was by accident.
That's a cool story. That's a cool story.
Yeah. So, but if it works, I'm going to be, I'd like to expand. I want to build a team around this, and then I want to expand into e-commerce and have multiple stores. I have the same team running it because the business process is the same once you have it down. The second thing I'm launching, this was on purpose, is a website called podcasthawk.com. Podcast, HAWK, the animal.com. The story behind this is most of my businesses come around with the same origin story. Pretty much I look for something on Google because I need it and I can't find it, or I don't find a good one. So I'm like, I might as well build that myself. That's Podcast Hawk's origin story. So the story here was I was looking to promote Live Lingua, find a new way to get, customers to take language lessons with us in Live Lingua. So I'm like, I should appear on podcasts. I've had podcasts myself in the past. As you'll know, Alan, it's a lot less work to be on a podcast than it is to actually do the podcast. You have to find guests, you have to research all the rest of it. So I'm like, let me get on podcasts. And then I started searching. I'm like, there's no real good way of doing this. You can't go to iTunes and Stitcher and search for podcasts to get interviewed on. It doesn't work that way. Their search functionality is awful. And it doesn't let you search by interviews or who's active or give you any contact information. So I went to Google. I'm like, let me Google podcast to appear on. Yeah, that doesn't work either. I went out and said, there must be services for this. Yes, there are. There's agents you can pay. And they're like, yeah, for $3,000, I'll get you on 5 podcasts. And I'm like, I'm not going to pay $3,000 to get on 5 podcasts. We're not talking like, Joe Rogan or anything like that, right? These are different levels of podcasts that if I just send them an email, I could probably get on. They just do the work of sending an email. So I'm like, look, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I spent that weekend. I'm like, okay, I'm a computer engineer. How would I do it? Can I get all the podcasts off of iTunes and Stitcher into a database? Spent a weekend. I'm like, yes, it's physically possible. I didn't get them all in a weekend. There are millions of podcasts, but I determined it's physically possible for me to go out there and get them. Is it possible for me to get all their contact information? Spent a weekend. I'm like, yeah, it's physically possible. So that was it. So I started launching it. This was back in March. We should be launching in January, maybe February. We might have to push our launch back 30 days. There's a few little things we're trying to iron out because it's software and everything. It never quite works quite as quickly as you plan. But the basic idea, what we have here in Podcast Talk, is we've simplified the entire process. So instead of you having to search everything, you can go into Podcast Talk, you create your account, and you can go in there and say, hey, I want to be on business podcasts that have at least 50 episodes. So I want something that's been around for at least a year. They've created a new episode in the last 90 days, so I know they're still active. And they've mentioned the word toilets in any episode description at some point, because I'm trying to promote my toilet paper store, right? So you just, instead of having to search Google for hours, day, or months, you just hit search, and 2 or 3 seconds, we give you every podcast that matches that criteria. And we have tons of other criteria you can search from. You hit, okay, that's it. You clean up the list, hit campaign, and you create an email outreach, and we kind of automate it a little bit for you. You hit save, you're done. And we, depending on your plan, we'll send out, 10, 25, or 50 emails a day to these people. I did a test run, generally on cold email outreach. If you get 1 to 3% of the people to reply to you, that's pretty good. Yeah, I got 34% of the people to reply to me. So it really backfired. I was on a lot of travel podcasts for the last 3 months because all of them answered me. But it also proved this system does work. I have some friends using it right now, and they're having on alpha testing, and they're having some success as well.
Super. It's the same thing. Like podcasts are growing, same as influencer marketing is growing. So we needed aggregators of influencers, and now you're doing the aggregators for podcasts. Genius.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Exactly. So,
all right. Anything else bubbling up?
Those are the main ones. I'm trying to limit myself now because, like all entrepreneurs out there, the whole shiny object syndrome. Yeah, I need to focus on these businesses for the next 2-3 years. All of them have great potential, more potential than a lot of my other ideas I've ever had. I'm luckily in a position with Live Lingua that I don't have to worry about like rent or, these businesses, every penny I make on them for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm anticipating is going to be invested back into either staffing or, into the systems. It's not going to be going into my pocket.
Oh, that's an interesting topic. Let's touch upon it for a little bit. The idea of reinvesting into the business, the money that you're making. Do you have a certain maybe scheme, a formula, or advice for business owners and entrepreneurs that are building a business? Many of them perceive their business pocket as their own pocket. And how would you approach it? What kind of advice can you give?
A great question, and you're absolutely right. When I give talks, I've been lucky enough to give some talks at some conferences. A lot of people ask me that. And I tell people, if you're taking every penny that you make and spending it, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. Because literally one thing goes wrong and you're not going to survive a month or two, because there's absolutely no savings in that business whatsoever, right? That being said, when you're starting off, you actually do need the money to survive. So there are 2 sides to it. First, figure out your minimum livable income and make that your salary. That's your salary at the business. That's what you pay yourself. If the business doesn't make enough to pay you, you make less salary this month, but if it makes more, you don't get any more. It's not like, hey, we had a great month. It's, I don't know, Black Friday, so this month was great. Yeah, that's not how it works. You still make whatever your salary was for that month. At least in the beginning, keep that up in your business. Later on, you can add something called dividends, right? Where you go either quarterly, by twice a year, or once a year. And you say, I'm taking 30% of the profit that we made this year, 50% of the profit we're making this year. I wouldn't pass 50% of the profit. I'm taking it. So I get my salary, plus I get 50% of the profit annually. That works out pretty well because you kind of even out over the month. So if you have high and low months, you don't get, a lot of money on the high months and nothing on the low months. It evens itself out. That's the system that I use in my businesses. For the new businesses, as I mentioned, I'm not even taking a salary. I'm looking at these as investment. I'll only take dividends, and I'm not going to be making any money. I don't plan on making money for about 2 years because, again, I need staff. I need more features. I need all the rest of it. It'll grow more quickly when you're doing it that way.
All right. Do you plan any investments as well from the profits that you make? How do you manage that in just light touch?
Oh, well, I could go more light touch. I actually like this. I just don't generally get to talk about it. So my dad also worked in finance for a while. My investment is, I'm kind of aggressive, but not in the traditional sense. So if anybody's looking to learn the basics about investment, read a book called The Random Walk Down Wall Street. That's pretty much the only book you ever need to read on investments. And it pretty much tells you the safe way to do things. I know some friends who are much more aggressive investors and they won't agree. But historically, if you try investing in stocks, only like 10% of the people or something like that are able to beat the market. So bet on the market is what we do. So my investment is pretty conservative. I do something what in the US is called a 401k, in my case, an I-401k, individual 401k. And I'm able to put away money into that. And I diversify about 70% stocks, 30% bonds, and the stocks are all index funds. So I do as well as the market does. Traditionally, that's 7% a year. Like always, it doesn't sound much, but I think it was Einstein who said, the most powerful force in the universe is like compounding math or something like that, right? Just do 7% times 7% times 7% on $100,000 for 50 years. And you'll be very pleasantly surprised at how much money is going to be in your bank account when you're done, right? So we do that, and we do something called dollar cost averaging, which means it's a fancy way of saying we put aside like a salary. We have a certain amount that goes in every single month. I don't care if the stocks are up or down. I'm not trying to beat it. The first of every month, I buy X number of stocks in my investment fund and, diversify it across. And we do that. And then once a year, you do something called rebalancing, just to kind of re-even your stocks. Sometimes your stocks will do better than your bonds. So you're trying to do 70%, 30%. But by the end of the year, it's 75%, 25%, right? If something did really well. So you sell 5%, you buy bonds. So you're back to 70, 30. And you do that once a year. That's it. And you consistently do that for 30 years. You'll have a few $1 million in the bank. I mean, anybody who's making an okay salary will have a few $1 million in the bank.
How much of the percentage of the income that you make you put into investments?
So with the 401k, at least, you're limited. If you have something called an I-401k, it's up to 20% of your income, up to a maximum $55,000. So if you make $10 million, you can't put more than $55,000, right? That's kind of the limit, but it's tax-free. I mean, you don't pay taxes before you put it in. We can get more complicated with a Roth, which means you pay taxes before and all the rest of it. But that's generally how much money you can put into that. If you have a traditional savings account, like a traditional 401k, I believe the limit's about $12,000 or $13,000 a year. So it's $1,000 a month. But don't let that sound bad to you, because most people do not put away $1,000 a month into any kind of retirement fund everywhere. Exactly. Do that for, if you're not, this might not be a good plan if you're listening to this and you're 55 and 60 and you need to retire in 5 years, maybe not for you. But if you have at least, 10, 20, 30, ideally 40, if somebody's listening to this and they're 21, they can start now. Woo, I wish I had put more money when I was 21 in there, because I'm 40. I'd probably be retired right now, or be financially independent. I did not. I spent it on a BMW and getting drunk Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights at the bar. So, I wish I really hadn't done that. But I think we have to pass through that phase in our 20s.
Yeah, interesting insights. Thank you. Let's look at having a really busy lifestyle. We have, let's say, I like to say 4 major things in life. We have business, we have family, we have self-care, as well as we need to constantly learn and develop. How do you manage in your life to keep that balance?
So about a month or two ago, somebody asked me what my superpower was, and it took me a little while to figure it out. And then unfortunately, I figured it out, and it's the most boring superpower known to man. And it's discipline. That's how I balance it. I mean, literally, so the story behind kind of exactly discovering what that is was I was at a conference, with a small conference, like 15, 20 people. And one of the activities they had is they give us all these little Post-it notes. And they're like, okay, write out your typical day. And on each Post-it note, put up one activity, right? When you wake up, what do? I'm like, this is kind of a weird exercise, but let's do it. So I put my head down, 6 a.m., wake up, 6:15 coffee, 6:30 meditation. So he said, I just worked my way through the day. So I did that for about 5 minutes. I look up and I start looking around the room. There's about 30 or 40 people in there, and everybody's like, I don't know what my typical day's like. My days are all different, and it depends and all the rest. I was kind of confused. So I go to the wall, and you're supposed to, we had on the walls, you put up all your stuff on there. And I had my 30 things in the day. And then the moderator for the room came, I was like, Ray, is this what you do every single day? I'm like, yeah, this is just 9 to 9:30, I check emails. Then, I do this. This is deep work. It's exactly the same every day. My days are boring. That's when I kind of started to realize that discipline was my superpower, because that's what I do. I wake up every day and I do exactly the same things. And this goes back to answering your question of how I balance it. I am very strict about my times. When I say my day, I stop working at 6 o'clock. That's it. I'm done working at 6 o'clock. From 6 to 9, it's time for the family.
How do you do that? How?
You tell yourself, I don't work after 6, and you're done. That's it. It's self-control. It's not like, I have to do this extra 30 minutes. There's 2 things for it. One, I work from 8 to 6. So I work about 10 hours a day. Studies show that actually after 55 hours of work a week, so I do 5 hours more than is recommended, but they say after 55 hours, your productivity goes down to like 40% of what it should be, right? So that last hour or that last 30 minutes, you're actually doing like an extra 7 minutes of work, 10 minutes of work max. Really, do you think you're moving your business ahead that much? And chances are you're so tired, you're probably gonna have to redo that work the next day. There is almost nothing that's gonna happen in that last 30 minutes of every day, that last hour of every day, that is gonna make a massive difference to your business. But if spending an extra hour or 2 with your family, that's absolutely gonna make a massive difference in your life. I don't work on the weekends. Same thing, exactly the same thing. I don't answer emails. I'll check them, but I will not answer them unless it's like, yeah, your server blew up. Yeah, then that's an emergency. I got to go there and get that up. But that's never happened. So, generally speaking, I don't work on the weekends either. It's all discipline. You stick to it. If you plan out well, I plan out my 2 weeks in detail, but I plan out my years as well. As far as what our goals are, triannual, I do every 4-month goals. I know what I can do. I've been doing it for years. So it's very rare that something comes along that comes out of nowhere and just throws that scheme off. I'm not going to say it never happens, but if you are disciplined about every single thing, about your emails, about your work, about your life, about your exercise, about your meditation, you let the people in your life know that, and let them know I'm doing this for you guys, right? I'm working till 6. They don't bother me until 6, but at 6, I'm yours. I mean, whatever you guys need, I'm there for you. That has helped me a lot in my work-life balance.
I would love to get to see, if you don't mind, I think many listeners would also be interested in seeing it. Can you provide an outline? I want to put it into the description or somehow. What is your what is your schedule like, so that others can understand? Because it's a great example of a system that is working year in, year out. It provides you stable results. It enables you to be with your family, taking care of yourself, taking care of the business, and it's growing and it's working.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that this system deserves a spotlight. And we're going to talk about a little bit more on how it functions in the following questions. So let's look at the idea of actually making decisions and setting priorities, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned you're working from 8 till 6. It's a really long time. We heard many studies that say that we actually have only 4 productive hours a day of real productive time. Everything else is just busy work. How do you set your priorities? How do you make decisions?
Absolutely. And, this is always a hit or miss in a learning experience, right? There's nobody out there who sets the perfect priorities and only does the stuff that's important in their business. That's unfortunately a dream a lot of us follow, but I'm not going to pretend I've cracked that code and I always get the priorities right. But I get them right more often than I get them wrong. But that's a lot of it is experience. So we start with a higher level. It's, you ask yourself, why am I doing all of these things? We talked about, building the passion. So I do enjoy it, but this is all building towards something. And the backstory for me, at least, it sounds callous. I'm doing it for money. Not because I want to spend it, not because I want to have expensive stuff, but growing up, I always felt like the poorest person in my class, and it somehow hit me. And the biggest worry in my life, I'm lucky to be healthy and, in a happy relationship, is always been money. It's how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my bills? I still think about that today, even though when you look at it objectively, unless I start buying Ferraris every single day for the next, 2 months, it's, we're not going to run out. It's just, I never want to have to worry about it. I don't want to, those big stresses. For example, our car broke down a little while ago, like 6 months ago. And, I remember my car broke down in the US and I was working a regular job as a computer engineer. That was a big stress. I had to go out and buy a new car and there were all these issues. This time it was like, okay. We went out the next day in cash. We just bought a new car. I mean, it's a Hyundai. I mean, it wasn't fancy, nothing like that, but it wasn't something that I spent any mental or emotional energy on. So that's what you do is you start with the why and be very clear about it. There's no wrong answer here, right? So if you want to be filthy rich and have a private jet, that's totally okay. If your why is to help as many people in the world as you can, that's okay as well. There's no moral judgment in here. You have to be honest with yourself. For me, it's a reduction in stress. It's not a physical thing. I have t-shirts I've had since college 20 years ago. Then you break it down, into goals of, okay, in order to do that, if it's financial, I need to be at this place in a few years, this place in a few years. Then you break it down to smaller objectives from there. I don't recommend breaking it down too much detail for anything more than 2 weeks. So that's what I do. For the next 2 weeks, I know exactly what I'm doing every single day for the next 2 weeks. After that, there's too many variables in place that I'm like, 3 weeks from now, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. So I've done that for years now. So you get all the way down into that, all the way down to what we were talking about before. That helps me break down my day and know what I'm going to be doing every single day, because it's like those CEOs you hear about that wear the same clothes every day. They don't have to think about it. I don't wake up in the morning and think about what I'm going to do today. It's already written. I know what I'm going to do. I just get up and do it. I mean, I don't waste mental energy in figuring out what I'm going to do. I know that. I know I'm with that for the next 2 weeks. And I'll always know that for the next 2 weeks. So that's kind of part of my process.
Okay. And during this process, like, what you need to do in the 2 weeks, yet we have also decision-making steps in between that, during that period, right? When you come out with making a decision, how do you decide? How do you decide where to go, what to prioritize, and what to work on?
This is actually what I'm laughing, because this is actually in my manifesto. One of the things I put in my manifesto is, am I doing an important task that I enjoy to avoid more important task I don't enjoy?
Oh,
that's one of the questions I ask
beautiful.
myself.
That's a golden nugget.
Yeah. You guys aren't looking, you can't see it because it's a podcast, but literally it's one of the ones on the bottom here on my notebook that I do every single morning. And that's exactly it, because I don't always succeed, but that tends to be a tendency for a lot of people. So you make your to-do list. If you do it right, most of those tasks should be important. But there's always the stuff that, like, ooh, that's fun. Oh, that's, I got to file my taxes. No, I don't want to do that. So I just have to ask myself when I'm going through the tasks to make sure what is the most important, and am I trying to avoid it? Because it's very easy to stay busy with something else to avoid doing the most important thing in your business. I have to ask myself that constantly, not to fall into that trap, and I still do fall into that trap sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, oh, let me just do this for 5 minutes, and then I spend the whole day doing it. So yeah, I'm still working on that.
How do you avoid it? Do you have any ideas what helps you to get back into the rhythm of doing what has to be done?
That manifesto that I'm talking about. So combined with that manifesto, I have my to-do list every single morning, right? So what I do is, when I'm writing the manifesto, I have the to-do list open in front of me. So as I'm reviewing it, I'm asking myself that question to become conscious about it. Because generally when we choose the easier fun task, it's not like a consciously, I'm going to do that fun task to avoid the non-fun task. We don't make that conscious thought in our head. You're just like, oh, that's important too. Let me do that. But it's really because you're trying to avoid something else. So if you ask yourself, when my to-do list every day has 3 main tasks on it, it's not like I have 100 things on it. There are 3 things I need to get done today. And I ask myself that question about every single one of them. Which one's the most important, regardless of which one I enjoy? And that's the one I start with.
All right. Tell a little bit more about the manifesto. What is it? Is it like a guide rules of how to live life, or what's it's about?
So let me bring it up so I can actually remember it better. There's 2 sections in the manifesto. And I won't take credit for this. I work with a business coach called Itamar Marani. He's a former special forces in the Israeli army, all the rest of it. So they do a lot of this stuff in the military over there. I believe I'll pitch Itamar. So if anybody's looking for coaches, he was the youngest air marshal in Israeli history. And he was also a bodyguard for a Russian oligarch for like 4 or 5 years. So he has some really interesting stories to tell. He was like the head bodyguard for like one of the richest people in the world for a while. So it's broken down into 2 parts. So I have a manifesto. That part I have, looks like about 15 different things there, where I'm trying to recenter who I am, who I think I am, or who I perceive myself to be. A lot of us actually do not look at ourselves correctly. And this is a big thing I'm still struggling with, right? So I've been lucky to have a successful business as of, like, to say 7 years ago. I was at 7 figures. I had never been to a conference before in my life when I built that business. So I went to my first conference thinking I did not know anything. And I ended up going to this conference. It was about 40 or 50 people. And I found out I was the only person there with a 7-figure business. And they're like, wow, a 7-figure business. That's amazing. But I was just like, wow, I'm a beginner. What are you talking about? I don't know what I don't know what I'm talking about. I've been to other conferences with people that 9-figure businesses, and yeah, compared to them, I really don't. But statistically speaking, if you run a 7-figure business or almost a multi-7-figure business, you're doing pretty well. That puts you like at the top 1% of businesses out there. I had trouble accepting that. right? That I actually vaguely knew what I was doing. And it's a work in progress for me to reconcile that fact with myself. So the manifestos has things like my weaknesses. I go over it. Let's say I don't avoid my rejection story is number 2 on my manifesto, because I'm a people pleaser. It took me a while to realize it. And I don't like putting myself in situations where people will turn me down, but that's been holding me back. So I put that in the manifesto every morning. Another thing, when this is what we're talking about, is I focus on completing one task at a time. Shiny object syndrome. It's one of my weaknesses, right? Where you start something and then like, ooh, let's go over here. So I put in my manifesto. These are all things I should focus on today. So there's about 15 things I have, controlling my mindset, all the rest of it. Then at the bottom, I have 5 questions that I ask myself every day, just to recenter and remember what I'm doing. So one of, I'd be happy to share them with them. Is there anybody who can help me what I need done today? Another one of my weaknesses. When I started off, I had the nobody can do this as well as me syndrome that a lot of entrepreneurs have, right?
Yeah.
I'm getting over it, but sometimes reaching out to my staff or even friends solve problems in 5 minutes that I would spend a week on, right? I mean, all I have to do is ask them instead of me researching and trying to do it myself. They're like, no, just do this. So I have to remind myself it's okay to ask for help. That's not a sign of weakness. We talked about, how can I, oh, well, this is a different one. Yeah, am I doing the tasks I enjoy to avoid important tasks I don't? How can I reframe uncomfortable tasks? That's one of the reasons a lot of people avoid them, right? If you have to fire somebody, unfortunately, I've had to do that before. Wow, that can waste your entire day, right? Just mental energy of anticipation. I'm going to fire him today at 4 o'clock. Your day is gone. If you can reframe that, like, okay, this job is not really a good fit for this person. So while they might be sad today, this might be the opportunity they need to really find their passion in life. Just as an example, you can reframe things. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, then, it's still not a pleasant task, but I'm not going to spend all day worrying about it anymore, because in the long term, this is the best. So I ask myself that every day. And then I have a few things there about, my diet and my rest habits as well, because if you're not eating well and if you're not resting, your productivity goes down. So that's basically it. And I spend it every morning as part of my kind of morning ritual. Is I rewrite those every single morning. It takes about 1 page in my notebook, and I spend about 5-10 minutes just writing that every single morning. And I've been doing that for a few months now.
And that's like refocusing on what's super important to your life.
That's it. You're programming your brain, right? If you keep on doing it. And I'm not very into like the new age stuff. I mean, I was very, very hesitant. I'm an engineer by training, right? I'm like, there was a comic or a comedian in the United States on Saturday Night Live like 20 years ago. And one of the things, he'd go on there and he would say something in the mirror. He's like, you're a good person.
Yeah,
darn it, people like you, right? And that was my idea of what this was. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to stand in front of the mirror, smile and say, gosh, darn it, people like me. I mean, what kind of ridiculousness is that? But again, my coach does martial arts like me and former military. And he's like, they've shown in the military that this kind of stuff works. You're training your brain to think these kind of things. So it's not new age. It's more like martial arts. It's like you're repeating something.
That's
you're repeating that punch,
right?
Every single day. It's exactly it. So I'm like, I'll give it a try. And I've actually found that it is working. I was surprised. I was like, I'm skeptical, but I'll just do it. And I'm finding it starts your day on the right foot. It's the first thing I do in the morning. So I started off there. I used to wake up and watch the news. That's not a good way to start your day, because the news never has good news. It's all about, oh, there's a war, there's a plague, there's, the stock market crash. That's news. That's how I started my days. Not anymore. This is how I started. I don't watch the news except on the weekends anymore.
Beautiful. So let's look at the life planning. Do you have something like an ideal life scenario where you want to be and you're striving towards? And how does that look like?
Another great question, and actually ties exactly into what we were talking here, because part of the morning ritual is this visualization of seeing myself there. And if anybody who's done it, again, I was very skeptical of this whole new age foo-foo stuff. But this one's very easy for you to try. Sit down, close your eyes, and imagine the life you dream. Just imagine you're there, right? With your family, financially secure, all the rest of it. I guarantee you're going to feel great. Just the act of thinking it, your endorphins are going to get going. And you're like, oh my goodness, it feels great, right? I don't know, sitting on the beach and I have my yacht and my wife and my kids are playing and their financial feels, even talking about it now, I feel good doing all of that, right? So for us, I have a very clear vision of where we want to be. Financially, I know how much money we want to have in the bank account to be financially stable. And my second act, what I'd like to do after entrepreneurship, is I do want to start a social enterprise to give back. That's how I came to Mexico. I quit my job in the United States and I volunteered for 2 years for almost no pay in southern Mexico. Those were some of the best years of my life. I'd love to be able to do that. I'm not so idealistic that I would do it when I have a family to support. But if I can get to a point where financially I don't have to do it, I'd love to go back to that. And that's where we want to be. My wife and I want to start a charity that helps people start online, a social enterprise, which helps people start online businesses, but focus generally on the developing world. Just because I've successfully multiple times built 6-figure and 7-figure businesses online, right? So I have a system that more or less works. But you don't even have to dream that big. If you live in the Philippines, where my mother's side of the family is from, if I could teach you, if I told you you can work a year and by the end of this year you're going to have a business that generates $500 a month, Alan, if I told you that, would you sign up for that? Probably not, right? You work for a whole year and you can make $500 a month at the end of it. You'd be like, I'm not paying you for that. I can go to get a job at McDonald's and I'll make more than that, right? But if you're in the Philippines or many parts of Mexico, that's from poverty to middle upper class. Right? So there are all these millions of niche businesses out there that can make $500 a month, maybe even $1,000 a month, right? That most people in the first world would never even touch because it's not worth their time. So my dream is, by the time I'm 50 and hopefully we're financially stable by then, is to start an organization where we go into the Philippines and Latin America and we teach people how to build these businesses, because this will take people from poverty into middle upper class overnight. So that's kind of, our dream is that, my family's secure, we don't worry about money, and we're helping people to do that.
Beautiful. And you center on that vision on a daily basis.
Every morning I spend at least a minute, just close your eyes and seeing myself, what it's like when I'm there. And that's really fun. I mean, come on, it feels great to do that.
Cool. To keep your daily activity productive, like waking up, you do your day plan. What are the systems that help you with that besides your journaling?
So again, it's all about rituals, right? So I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is wash my face, brush my teeth. I come down, I have the journal, and our cook brings, as I said, I have help. Our cook brings me my cup of coffee. I start drinking the coffee as I'm doing the journal. Then I go and meditate. I do my morning stretches. And then I don't check email. I don't do anything until then. Then that usually is about 7:30. So by the time we're there, my son comes down. I play with him for 30 minutes. At 8 o'clock on the dot, I start working. So that's my morning ritual every single morning, Monday through Friday. Weekends are different. But Monday through Friday, that's what I do. It's a lot of people say, wow, that sounds boring. I'm like, well, but that's it. I don't think about it. I don't decide to do it every morning. So there's none of that, well, I don't feel like doing it today. It's just something you do every single morning. It's like putting on shoes or putting on my socks. It's not a decision. It's just part of my day.
Let's talk about business systems, all right? You have 4 businesses. What kind of maybe software or products or systems that you have in place that help you to be productive there? Like keep track of your goals, of your plans, of your team, communication. What can you give some insights around there?
Yeah, so on the software end, on all my businesses, I use the same software suite because I'm not going to be flipping between different software suites for all the businesses, right? So for the product management, we use a software called Notion. It's free up until about 10 users. And most of my businesses don't have more, even LiveLingua only has 8 staff, so I don't have to pay for it. So you can have multiple businesses there. So you have like a drop down. We use Slack for inter-office communication, and we use Google Drive for a lot of the online storage. We tried Dropbox, it had some issues. So we use Google Drive for our online storage. And those are generally the systems that we use on the software side that are consistent across all of our businesses. For the way I run the businesses is great teams. So I don't launch, there's an exception with the 2 businesses I'm launching in January, but I remember one's an accident. I generally do not launch a new business unless my other businesses are close to running themselves. LiveLingua, if I took a month off of LiveLingua, nothing would happen. I have an amazing team there that's going to run the business by themselves. I spend about an hour a day on LiveLingua just to make sure everything's going okay, everything's on plan. We're bringing in a COO in January, probably an hour, reducing it to an hour a week, right? So it's going to be her job to make sure that everything's on, moving in the right direction. It's just my job to pick the direction, right? As the CEO, I'm like, this is where we're going. And I go out there and promote and I talk to people on podcasts about it, but I'm not going to be that worried about the day-to-day operations. That's how I do it. So you get to a business at that point, then you build another one. Get it to that point, build another one. It's not a matter of building 4 at exactly the same time, that wouldn't work. Even building 2 at the same time right now, there's a few days where I'm like, wow, this is kind of overwhelming. I get so much to do because I'm trying to launch these 2 businesses at the same time. I'd much rather, launch one this year and launch one the following year. It just didn't work out that way. But the goal in both of those businesses, the reason I was talking about reinvesting, is I'm reinvesting every penny to get them to that point even more quickly, right? I'm not going to take anything out because I want to get them there by the end of next year to a point where maybe not full-time, 1 hour a week, but at least I'm only not spending 10 hours a day on each one of them. Right? It's just maybe a few hours a day on each one.
That's a great idea. This year I've been over and over again hearing this idea that we need to free our business from the shackles of our time. And otherwise it won't be able to grow because we will always be limiting the business growth with our time. And if something goes wrong in any part of life, it takes away from our business to be able to run and be sustainable. And building out that team is a powerful asset for the business to grow and prosper. That's a really interesting thought. We're going to touch upon how to make that happen in a moment. But additionally, in terms of business growth, from your activities, can you pick out something that you do on a monthly, on a weekly, and a daily basis that is truly pivotal to your business growth? This is a no-negotiable that delivers results and you must do it.
It's a good question. And I don't know if I actually have an answer to that one, a pivotal one, just because as our business moves around. But on a high level, on a monthly, it is those monthly goals that I set up. It's pivotal, setting those goals, not that there's a specific goal every month. It's setting those goals that is pivotal to moving the business forward, because that's how my team's pretty small, 8 people for the full-time. We have 150 staff if you count the contractors, but the 8 people are full-time. That's how I make sure everybody's moving in the same direction. On a weekly basis, I have a weekly meeting with the core team members. And we run it a little I've been in Masterminds for a long time. So I run them like Mastermind meetings are. It's an accountability group. It's not really a meeting. So the way that we do it is you say, hey, you made commitments last week to do these. How do you do? And what are your commitments for the next week? That's it. That's all our meetings are. If we need to talk about details, you can have one-on-ones with me, but generally that's good enough. That's what we do on a weekly basis. I don't really do the daily stuff because it's too small of a time frame, in my opinion, for pivotal stuff. Maybe when you're starting off, it's very different. In a startup phase, day to day is pivotal. When you have an ongoing concern, which is a 7-figure business, it's an ongoing concern. It's not about the day to days. It's about the week to weeks, month to months, year to years that you're concerned about. So generally, our planning is more on that scale than on the micro of this. Today you got to do this. Today you got to do that. Other than the discipline I'm talking about, I do that every day, right? That's critical to my day.
If we're talking about, you mentioned, for a stable business, 7-figure one, it's all about the weekly, monthly, yearly strategy, the vision, and staying focused. For people who are in a stage of solopreneurship, what would you say a daily activity would be that they should super focus on?
Okay, and I can actually relate, remember, because I'm launching 2 businesses as a solopreneur right now, even though I also have, a 7-figure business we're running on the side. So the thing that I focus on, there's 2 different phases, right? If you're pre-launch, it's different than if you're launch. So I'm in pre-launch right now. So the thing that I focus on is getting the MVP, the minimum viable product for my product, up and going. Everything you're doing should be focused on that. A lot of people are like, well, I don't have my email sequence written yet. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Your website's not up yet. Do you care if there's an email sequence? Nobody's visiting. You have no traffic whatsoever on your website. Get the product up. Whether your website's an e-commerce store, whether it's a SaaS product, whether it's a productized service, doesn't matter. First thing you do in the online space, which is where my expertise is get that website up there. Offer it. I don't care if the website doesn't look perfect. I don't care how, if there's spelling mistakes on the homepage. Nobody reads anyway. Just get something up there so you can start doing it. So that's generally the first priority when I'm launching every business. Priority number 2 is marketing. So as soon as that's up, the next thing you have to do in the business, and this is what I'm going to start in January, is market. You have to figure out whether anybody wants your product as quickly as possible. Your product, your service, whatever it is, as quickly as possible, with as little money spent as possible. So you can figure out whether it works or not. If within 12 months, you're not making any kind of significant gains on there, sorry. This might be your baby. This might be your dream. Kill it. The business is probably not working. at least in the bootstrap phase. Again, you have $10, $20 million to throw at the problem. You might be able to get past that phase. Most of us don't. And arguably, if you have $20 million in the bank, what are you doing? Doing a startup. I mean, you can spend your money in much better ways. You could be investing in 1,000 startups with that much money, right? So that's generally my process, right? So we went a little off track with that, but my business process is I pre-vet ideas by looking if anybody's looking for them. So you go into Google keyword tools and I see if anybody's searching for the product that I want to sell. If nobody's searching for it, I'm like, what am I selling, right? Nobody looks for this. We're not the iPhone. We're not Tesla. We can't create new products that nobody even knew they needed and then start selling it. Some people can. It's not my space. I see if anybody's looking for it first. Then I build the basic MVP, the minimum viable product. Then I market for the next year. If at the end of that time it doesn't work, then I have plenty of other business ideas, and I think most entrepreneurs out there do as well. So don't worry, you got another idea on your list and start working on that.
Got you. That's a great advice. Now, moving on to actually growing and sustaining the business and removing the time limitation of your own time. For the solopreneurs and entrepreneurs out there, what can you suggest in the framework of outsourcing tasks? What kind of advice can you give, like super practical? Because usually we hear a lot about that, yes, outsourcing is important, but what kind of advice can you do to actually efficiently do that?
Great question again. And I actually have a process for it, but I didn't realize it until recently that it was a process until somebody actually asked me that. So I have an exact process when I'm starting of how stages of hiring that I go through when I'm building a business. And the stages actually involve geographies. So the first stage of hiring is when you're making an extra $500 to $1,000. For that means you have enough money to get a VA, which can get repetitive administrative tasks off your plate. Generally, in my experience, that's in the customer support and email areas, whether it be scheduling, depending on your business model, right? For that, I go to the Philippines, primarily because I'm half Filipino and I can speak their language, right? So I go to the Philippines, but you can also go to almost anywhere in Southeast Asia. Works pretty well for that. That's the first stage of hire I would recommend to anybody starting. Get that off your plate. Don't answer email. You don't have to answer emails or basic customer support, because trust me, if you do it for a year or two, you've probably gotten the same questions like 100 times. Sit down, write up an SOP and a standard operating procedure so that the people in the Philippines can follow it, and hire them to do that. People at that price range, around $500, if you find a good one, they're good at following instructions, but do not go in with the expectation that they're going to own it, in the sense that, yeah, if something's not on the SOP, they're still going to come to you for help. That should be your expectation. Don't get annoyed when they come to you for help, because you're paying $500 a month for somebody for full time. They're not there. You might get lucky. You get a rock star. They're going to own it. They're going to do it. But chances are you're just going to have somebody who's going to get the job done, clear up your plate a little bit. That's stage one for every entrepreneur that's hired. You make an extra $500, that's where you go. Stage two, and one of my favorite hacks, is once you get to the point where you can pay about $2,000 a month for a staff, $1,500 to $2,000 a month, depending on the staff you're going for, you look for expats. So if you're in the United States, the one I look for is expats in Latin America. So, Americans who live in Mexico or in Argentina or in Chile, right? Generally, you want something called a trailing spouse, which means they're married to somebody who's in that country, and means they're probably going to be stuck in that country. What you're able to do with a $1,500 to $2,000 salary is you can hire people who would probably be high $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 in their home country. But since they're in Mexico, they're never going to make that salary. $2,000 a month is more than an engineer working at Google in Mexico City makes. So you're offering this to somebody in, somebody in an American, somebody from the UK and Mexico. You can work at home. You can spend time with your kids. You can the flexibility. I don't care if you go out for lunch for an hour. It's most of these are kind of higher level tasks than you give the Filipino VA. You're giving them an amazing salary, but you're saving 50% at least on what you would pay them if they were in their home countries. An example I gave is, for a while I had an executive assistant who was from Belgium, half Canadian. She had a master's in organizational, organizational, not behavior, but business organization, right? And I paid her $1,200 a month full time to be my executive assistant. She spoke like 4 languages. What was the thing? She lived in Guadalajara, Mexico, and she liked going surfing on the weekends. I'm like, okay, I don't care if you're surfing, you surf in the morning, you work for me during the day, and you surf again in the afternoon. That doesn't matter to me. And it weighed way more money than she would ever make as an assistant anywhere. And forget about her having being able to surf, right? I mean, she would not have been able to surf, let alone make this great income. She was, upper class by Mexican standards to do it. So that's my second level. Third level is hiring the traditional way. Once your business gets up there and you want to kind of place yourself in your country, the United States, for example, then you can hire people into your business. But at that point, you can hire somebody who knows HR to help you get the business to that level. Because once you're there, you're talking about paying for their medical, their social security, their insurance, all the rest of it. But you can afford to pay for an HR company that kind of takes care of all of that. So you're not messing up and getting into trouble with the IRS or whatever the tax agency is in your country. Those are the steps in every business I built.
Super. That's super valuable stages. Can you tell also how do you actually find them? Like, what is the process of searching for them?
Okay, so yeah, it again varies depending on what level you're at. So if you're looking for a Filipino VA, I use a website called onlinejobs.ph. You go up there, you post a job, do the standard hiring process. So the first one I do is I send them email questions. That filters out about half of them. Most people don't even bother answering. Not even, even if they're not technical questions, you just kind of send out the email questions over there. Number two is you give them a technical task to complete, whether it's customer service, you give them examples, how would you answer these emails, with the assumption that they don't know your business that well, but you're just kind of trying to see how they deal with the situation. If it's more programmers, then I give them a programming question, whatever it is. Then that usually gets me down to 2 or 3 people I want to interview. From a big pool, gets down to 2 or 3. I interview them, and then they always come on a 3-month trial. So if there's like 2 people you're not sure about, especially at the $500, $700 range a month, you can usually negotiate. Hey, I'm going to pay you guys $400 for 2 of you for 30 days. And whoever does the best gets the $600 salary at the end of it. But I need to see how you guys work out. So I've done that quite a few times as well. So that's on the lower level of the hiring. For the other one, for the hiring the expats, Facebook, actually, you can look for expats in and just type in Venezuela, Colombia, something like that. There are groups all over the place. And they're happy for you to put job posting as long as you're not trying to sell something, right? So like, look, I have a job. I'm looking for somebody who's got these qualifications. Here's the application. They'll let you in. You post there, and that has worked really well for me to find people at that level. And when you get to the higher level hiring in the US, honestly, at that point, it's networking. I want recommendations. I ask my friends who run businesses and the rest of it. Do you know anybody? Do you know anybody else? It's never let me down. If I have a friend who's a programmer, I'm like, I know you're not hiring, but do you have any good programmer friends who are looking? He'll always send me 4 or 5. I need a manager. You talk to a friend who's a manager, you'll have 4 or 5 friends to do it. That's what I do for the highest level.
Super insight. Thank you. For the first hire, as you mentioned, right? The first hire any solopreneur can make is a VA, offload all the major tedious routine things.
Administrative stuff.
Yeah. Got you. And let's look at the topic of marketing and sales. And in the buyer's journey, there's always a certain point we have to focus on that is one of the most important ones. Like, what in your experience is the most important step in the buyer's journey, and what can the entrepreneur do to maximize it?
Okay, so in my opinion, the most important step in the buyer's journey is the moment they're about to put that credit card in or give me their emails, right? Right before the sale is, to me, the most important step, because that's everything else in your buyer's journey, everything else in your funnel is to get them to that point, right? And to lose them there, wow, that's frustrating, right? I've done all this work to get you to pull out your credit card, and I don't know, you make it harder or something like that to put in the credit card. The marketing, that's why the marketing method that I like the best is search engine optimization. One, because if you're bootstrapping businesses, it's free. It's boring, it's repetitive, but you don't have to actually pay money to be number 1 in Google in the organic results. It takes a lot of work to get there. The second reason is you're catching people at that point in their buyer's journey. So I'll use my example for livelingua.com, right? So we rank top in the world for Spanish tutors online. If you're searching for Spanish tutors online, it's because you're looking to hire a Spanish tutor online. You're already at the end of the sales funnel. It's not that you're learning Spanish and you're like, this would be kind. No. You're looking for a tutor right now. And I catch you in Google because we show up at the top right at the end of the sales funnel, almost at the point you're ready to give me your email. In our case, we give you a free trial lesson for 30 minutes, so you don't give us a credit card right away. But right at the point where you're giving, you're like, okay, here's my email. Give me that Spanish tutor online that I'm looking for. So for me, SEO is the marketing method for anybody who's, again, bootstrapping. You have money, throw it into Facebook ads and Google ads. That's great. I've never started a business with money before. I've hit or miss with Google and Facebook ads. You know, they work half the time, they don't. And if you don't have, you know, a few $1,000s to waste, it's not really what I'd recommend for somebody starting off. SEO is, but SEO, like business, is the long game. If you want to be on the first page of Google, depending on the market you're in, it's minimum 6 months. If it's competitive, 1 to 2 years before you start kind of getting to the top of the organic results. You have to go in mentally prepared for that. So you know, it should start as a side hustle. If you're using SEO as your methodology, where you do like 15 minutes of SEO work every single day for 2 years, and by then, boom, you have free traffic, and now you can sell to these people.
Can you give any ideas? Can you give any ideas in terms of what can an entrepreneur get to know about SEO, to at least, if they are not even a techie, to what they can do?
So, I mean, SEO, search engine optimization, you don't actually need to be a techie. It's not really a tech stuff. It's covered in a little bit of a tech cover, because when you read like these experts, they always go into, well, your schema needs to be this way, or your H1 tags have to be this way, or your internal backlinking anchor text should have the rich, you know, should have a naked links for 30, you know, they can use jargon like that all the time. I've been doing SEO for 14 years. Like, by SEO standards, I'm like, you know, I'm old, you know, in the SEO world. But generally, SEO is broken down into 2 parts. One is optimizing your own website. That's about 20%. The other part is building links back to your website. So people are linking to your website. That's the 80% of it. If you're just starting off, because we could do a whole podcast on SEO, that's a whole, I mean, there are books, there are 1,000-page books written on this. What I recommend is look up at moz.com, moz.com. They have a 50-page SEO primer. That'll teach, it's the, you know, Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. That'll teach you the 80% you need to know in 50 pages. Read that up. You know, basically, it's going to tell you what to do on page to optimize your page, and it's going to go over 10 common ways to start building links back to your website. Generally speaking, the overview is you need to have something worth linking to. So create some cool content, whether it's an article, videos, podcasts work as well for link building. The reason I, you know, appear on a lot of podcasts, I'm getting a link back, right, from all of these. That's SEO. I'm doing SEO by appearing on podcasts on my website. There are multiple techniques. You just find one that works for you and your industry.
We touched upon self-awareness. We touched upon self-development. And do you remember a tool or system that you encountered throughout your life that gave you a massive boost to your self-awareness?
Throughout my life, let's see, what was probably meditation. You know, I'm relatively new to it, like 4 or 5 years ago. And the reason was, you know, my wife and I went through some medical issues about 4 or 5 years ago, and we were looking for a way to deal with stress. So we walked the Incan Trail, and then afterwards we went to Lake Titicaca up there in Peru, and we went to this like 3 or 4 day silent retreat for meditation. They said it was for beginners, and it's really, you know, they're like, oh, cool. You know, so we go, there's like 11 or 12 of us. None of us had really meditated before. I had from martial arts, but we do like 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning of every practice and 2 or 3 minutes at the end. So nothing major. The first day they're like, okay, now you can't talk. Sit down. We're going to meditate for an hour and a half. And all of us were like, what? I'm like, you know, we've never meditated before. They didn't give us any instructions. They're just sit comfortably, breathe, and meditate for an hour and a half. We did that for 3 days. So we meditated 6 hours a day for like 3 or 4 days. It was a lot of work, obviously, because, you know, this is just, but the way we felt afterwards was great. I mean, it was really relaxing. And one of the cool things about it was like throwing you in the deep end of the pool, coming home and meditating 15 minutes a day. After that was just like that. 15 minutes went by like that, right? And I find it's a great way to center yourself, be with yourself for like 10 minutes a day. In our busy life today with social media and cell phones, we're never just like sitting there quietly, right? There's always, if you're quiet for a second, I challenge you not to pull out your cell phone. We do it. We don't even think about it, right? Before we even know it, we have a cell phone in our hands. We're on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, you know, checking the news. Just sit there, breathe for 10 minutes, and you'll be surprised at the effects. There's science behind it too. You can read it, you know, the neurological effects of it. But that's kind of been a really nice hack. It's more on the relaxing, less on the work. But if you're relaxed, you work better.
Have you ever encountered any personality typing theories, tools, or systems? Did you touch upon them or not yet?
So I've taken it, right? I mean, I think I'm an int J on there. And I actually know the owner of 16 Personalities. He makes a lot of money off that website. But the science behind it is quote unquote pseudoscience, even though there is studies that show it works. In fact, at LiveLink, we're implementing a system where we work with a psychologist where we actually do that for your learning style. And we're going to be pairing you up with a teacher based on that. To me, none of those systems have made a huge impact on my life as far as, the way that I've chosen to live. Meditation, one of the things about meditation, it gets you to know yourself better. And if the better you know yourself, the better you're able to make decisions about yourself 100%. In your life. And that's really been one of the revelations for me is, again, I thought I was this guy who didn't know what they were doing. I was the shortest kid in my class when I was growing up because I was Filipino. But then I realized it was because I was actually 2 years younger than anybody in my class because they skipped a grade. Yeah, that actually makes a big difference when everybody's 12 years old and you're 10 or they're 18 and you're 16, right? But I always thought I was short. I'm 6 feet tall now. I mean, I'm not a giant, but I'm not. It took me until I was like 30 to realize I'm like, I don't think I'm actually that short, because I'm tallish on my end, right? But that shows you the mental barriers that you have in place that I thought I was short for most of my life. It took, 3/4 of my life to figure out I was not short. And I think there's a lot of things you'll find in your life that the way you think about yourself is not really the way the world sees you. And meditation will help you realize that.
Cool. Got you. Let's touch upon growth of income. And as you mentioned, what it's like a life of poverty. You've managed to outgrow it and build a successful life, as successful to the extent as you perceive, right? Your own success. Let's touch upon an idea of crossing the barrier of a certain level of income. Let's say when it was before, when you were making, let's say, average wage, what was the number you were looking towards and you felt like, wow, that's a big number?
$100,000 a year.
100,000 a year.
I remember it distinctly. When I make 6 figures, that's going to be amazing.
All right. Yeah. So 100K a year.
120 actually, because it was 10,000 a month.
Yeah,
and I thought that would be like,
okay. Yeah. So you reached the 10K a month. You've done it stable for a year. How did you feel differently?
I did.
Did you become a different person than you were?
No, and unfortunately, my worries didn't end, right? So my number started a lot less, right? So when we started our first business, again, bootstrapping in Mexico, I remember thinking if we make $2,000 a month, it's what I was talking about, middle upper class lifestyle in Mexico. That'll be great. You make 2,000. I'm like, maybe it's 4,000 where I'm going to feel like this is great, right? So you make 4,000. I'm like, no, 10,000. That old number from the United States. I'll feel amazing. I'll never worry about money again. Nope. 20,000. I'll never worry about money again. No, I mean, the number just, 30,000. No, so it just never ended until I started thinking about, and I'm still struggling with this, right? I mean, as I said, it is probably my biggest driving force is the worry about money. But if somebody realistically asked me, do you make enough to live? And I looked at it objectively, yes. Somebody actually asked me the other day when I was worrying about it. And I'm just like, yeah, I still worry about money all the time. It's like, if you ran out of money today and, luckily our house is paid off, our car's paid off, we have no debt, right? How long could you live? And I was like, well, if we went into saving, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, like 23 years. Like, and you're worried about money? I'm like, well, yeah. That's the thing. Technically, I hope to live longer than 23 more years, so I would run out of money eventually. But that also means I have 23 years to figure out how to make some more money. Without us being on the street, without us starving. I mean, it wouldn't be like a high level lifestyle, but just bare basic, pay rent, pay for food. 23 years, we wouldn't have to worry about it. And that kind of is starting to change my perspective, right? Because it's obviously we're making more than we need. I knew that, intellectually, I knew that. It's just it's what we're talking about. It's taking a while for that emotional, that inside me to realize, yeah, you're not who you were 15 years ago, right? Making $2,000 a month and trying to worrying about paying rent and surviving for another month. You're not there anymore. But my lizard brain is still back there, and I'm still working on getting my lizard brain to catch up with all of that.
Got you. In the sequence of actually getting that growth of income, getting that, breaking through those, let's say, levels, what actually influenced? Was it a change in mindset? Was it the introduction of discipline? What influeed the growth?
Okay, so the first big one was the getting past the nobody can do it as well as me and hiring help. That was probably the biggest. First 4 years, it was just me. just me and my wife, right? For a brick and mortar, I would answer the emails, I would do all of it. Because nobody can answer emails as well as I can, right? And nobody can make websites as well as I can, or whatever else I had in my head at the time. At that point, like a lot of people at that age, I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, discovered virtual assistants, and I'm like, okay, look, I hate answering emails. I do 10 hours a day of this stuff. Let me just give it a shot. I mean, it's $500 for us, but that was still a lot of money back then. But I'm like, let's just see what happens when I did it. I did it, and within 3 weeks, my life was changed. Now, don't get me wrong. We didn't have a rock star VA. In fact, I think the first one lasted 3 months, and I had to go and get another one and train them, and it didn't work out perfectly the first time. But I remember thinking those, like 2 weeks into it, I'm like, wait, what do I have to do now? I'm like, because I just felt like I had nothing to do all day. That goes away very quickly because I filled myself up with other work. But at least there was a week or two where it took me work to figure out what I was going to do with my time. That was probably the most, the biggest growth period. Because that year, our business doubled. The next year was when I hired people from Western cultures, which is the expats. Business went up 70% because suddenly I went from some, people who could do an okay job to people who could do a great job at their different positions. And that was the next. So that goes kind of hiring steps have been what's grown my businesses. I'm still trying to figure out how to get to that 8-figure mark. So I'll let you know. I'll come back on once I do that, and I'll tell you what the secret was to get me from 7 to 8 figures. I have not figured that part out yet.
Super. Yeah. And also in the self-awareness, there's part for self-care rituals. You mentioned that in the morning, one of the most biggest priorities is journaling, meditation, during the day, having some workout.
Yes,
anything
absolutely.
else that you have maybe in a yearly practice, not just day to day, but maybe you have a yearly practice. So what you engage
every
in?
6 months, I take 1 week off for a rest vacation. So there's 2 types of vacations out there, and we've all been on all of them, right? I remember when I worked in corporate America and I got 10 days of vacation off every year, what I would do is I'd go to a new country and get to see as many things as I could in those 2 weeks. And I'd come back and I was more exhausted than when I left on vacation, right? Because I'm like, we got to see something new every day. I still enjoy those kind of vacations, but those are not rest vacations. Those are tourist vacations. So every 6 months, what we do is we have rest vacations. My wife and I have 2 places we rent out, Airbnbs. So one of them's on a beach, which we go to in February. So it's not too obnoxiously hot, because going to the beach in Mexico in the middle of the summer is, that's 100% humidity, super hot all the time. So we go there with a week, barely has internet connection. It's like our cell phones have like 2 bars on it. So I can check emails if I need to, but I can't really do work. And we try not to do work there. We pretty much go down there. We take our Kindles, we fill them up with books, and we do nothing but read for 7 days. For the first 3 days, it's amazing. 4th, 5th day is pretty good. By the 6th day, we start talking about work again. That's how we know we're recharged, right? It's like, I can't wait to go back and do this. So we do that. And then there's also a house on a lake we do, which is where we go in the summer. Here in Mexico, in a town called Pátzcuaro, we rent out a house, same deal, no internet. And we just go there and rest. So we do that every 6 months religiously. It was my wife who got me to do that, because I worked 3 years without vacation for a while. And I'm like, I don't need it, until I went. And suddenly, I didn't realize how stressed I was until I went on vacation. And suddenly my whole body went, I shut down. I slept like 15 hours. I mean, it was ridiculous. So now we do it every 6 months. I've learned for myself that that's my burnout point. At 6 months, I tend to burn out. So I need this 1 week recharge.
Oh yeah, 52 hours each week. It definitely deserves a recharge.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Now, touching upon the surrounding and its influence, as you said, one of the most important things in your manifesto is asking for help. There is a quote by Jim Rohn that your income is the average of the 5 closest friends. And the question for you is how important it was and is, right, your surrounding for your growth and success.
It has been in the last 4 years. As I mentioned at the beginning, I was that guy in, that typical tech entrepreneur that works out of the garage and doesn't talk to anybody. I'm a computer geek, by training. That was me for like 7 years. But then we had stagnated for a little bit. I started networking. It takes a little bit of work, kind of going to conferences and meeting people, to meet people at the right level for you. And by right level, I mean people who are slightly above you, but not way above you. Like if you sat me down at a table with Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Richard Branson, I wouldn't know what they were talking about, right? I mean, they would start talking. I'm like, that's just a waste of their time and my time, because that is just so much higher than me that I wouldn't know, what was going on. But if I have a 7-figure business, and let's say I'm in a mastermind right now with everybody has actually mid 7-figure businesses going on 8. I'm the guy with the smallest business in my mastermind. That's a perfect place for me to be. I love being there. I am the dumbest person in that room. But it's a great, they're not so far gone that I don't know what they're talking about. They're just talking about it at one or two levels above me. And that's what I'm looking for the opportunity to learn. So that's masterminds has been my way of finding that. Generally joining masterminds with people you've met in person is what's worked out pretty well for me, not just going and signing and paying for a mastermind online. Those have never worked. But I go to conferences, I meet people and we either say, hey, let's start a mastermind together, or in the case of this mastermind, I met half the group, and there was this one guy who does masterminds professionally. He's like, you guys would be in a good mastermind. Let me put it together. This is the cost. I arrange it. He does all the logistical work, all of that, does the notes. And we've been in it now for 7 months, and all of us just signed on for another year. So all of 2021, we're going to continue in that mastermind. That's been a very productive way. So it's an accountability group plus kind of mentorship built in.
What do you feel is in the mastermind? Taking into account, I believe so as well, that mastermind is one of the most powerful ways that we can grow as entrepreneurs as well. What is the crucial aspect of a mastermind that makes it work? Besides, like, trust, as you said, right? Also, just let me add a little bit more flavor to this question. As you said, online didn't work for you, offline did. And
we meet online, but we met, our mastermind is online, but we meet. We met in person, hung out at conferences, in some cases, multiple conferences with these people. So I knew them, and I knew I got along with them beforehand. So there's two sides to a mastermind. The first one is trust, because it needs to be a place where you're comfortable sharing everything about your business and being honest about it, because otherwise it doesn't work. If you only share 50% of your problems, they can't fix it, because maybe those other problems are actually influencing the problems that you're talking about, right? So you need to have this trust. Second one, and it's hard to determine, is the chemistry in the mastermind, right? Which is why I stress the importance of having met these people in person. And the people I hadn't met in person were friends of the people I met in person, right? Or people that they knew and they got along with. So chances are, if I got along with you, I'd get along with somebody else who got along with you as well, right? So that's kind of the thing, because they become in a lot of senses your kind of close friends instead of just business people, right? Because you talk about everything in the mastermind, sometimes even personal stuff. Business, we talked about work-life balance or separation of work and life. Yeah, there's no such thing. You have trouble with your personal relationships, your work is affected. And, you need to be able to bring that to the mastermind. Everybody in the mastermind that I'm in is, in my age range, between 30 and 50. So I'm kind of right in the middle, but, they're married or have long-term girlfriends, and many of them have kids. So they understand that the issues that we're going through, and they're dealing with the same issues at home as we are, and they're dealing with the same issues at work that we are. So the fact that we get along and we kind of have this similar background helps. I wouldn't recommend getting into a mastermind of, let's say, if you're super liberal, being in a mastermind with all these people whose worldview is very conservative. Not that one's right, one's wrong. It's just you guys wouldn't. Yeah, the chemistry would not work. That's very hard to figure out. That's one reason why I've tried these online masterminds where they just kind of pick and choose and they throw you into a group. They never work out, because that doesn't work. Chemistry. Yeah, chemistry is really, really hard to figure out. Unless you've hung out in person and you know these people and you're like, yeah, you're a cool guy, I'd love to be in a group.
What about trust? The chemistry, I fully understand where it is built from. What about trust? What is important, you believe, in a mastermind to build the trust?
Well, there's two ways to do it. In this mastermind, at the beginning, everybody signed an NDA, right? Because though we knew each other from the conferences, we're also business people. Nobody took it personally that we had to sign an NDA, right? Because we're talking significant businesses here, right? People are going to be sharing secrets or problems that they have in their business, and they don't want you going telling their friends around. So I never start a business relationship without a contract. Nobody. I'm never going to be, hey, I talked to you, we're going to do it. And I think signing this NDA was a big key to this trust, is that everything was written out. We all went in with the same expectations. We all went in knowing that everybody else here is serious about this trust factor, right? If anybody said, I didn't arrange it, but I'm assuming nobody pulled out of it saying, no, I'm not going to sign an NDA. Because if somebody doesn't want to sign an NDA, it means, what are you here for? You're really here to steal something from the rest of us? So I think that was a huge factor for us, was just the NDA. We knew each other. There was a legal document behind it that we couldn't share everything. Not that any of us were really worried about it, but between those two things, we went in for the first one. We're like, yeah. And like always, it'll take a few meetings for people to warm up. It's not like everybody's going to open their heart in the first meeting. But since you get along, we joke and we cry and we share our issues with each other. And usually it's one person who kind of takes the next step in the trust and goes a little deeper. And then now that he did it, I feel more comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
And then somebody else goes a little deeper, and you do that for like a month, 2 or 3 months. By then you're like totally open with each other and you share everything.
Beautiful. Very beautiful. What do you believe in terms of actually for the people who are not able to go to conferences and are not able to meet up right in person with others,
which is everybody right now with COVID, right? So that's like everybody in the world. So
yeah, what would you say in terms of actually getting into a mastermind? Would you still recommend them to try?
What I would do is step number one is join an online community and try to find your mastermind through that. So there are people who arrange masterminds for you. So it's like, it's straight into masterminds, right? I'm part of three communities online that I'm active in. And that's what I would recommend to start. My masterminds came out of those. It wasn't that I went in looking for a mastermind. Went in looking for a community. I tried a few other ones. They weren't really good fits. But go online, try to find communities. There's communities for everything, online. So go in there, go online to forum, see which ones where the people kind of feel like your tribe. Most of the communities do have yearly meetups once those get up. So if, to take it to the next level, you go to their actual meetup, wherever it is in the world, see if it's a real good fit. Then mastermind would be the step after that. I wouldn't recommend it as like the step number one.
Where do you search for them, for the communities?
Honestly, all the communities I found were through podcasts. So if you listen to a lot of business podcasts, a lot of those business podcasters have their own communities. So if you find some podcast you resonate with, look if they have a community. So one of the big communities I'm very active in, I spoke at our conference last year, is called the Dynamite Circle. It's tied to the Tropical MBA podcast. So I listened to their podcast. I'm like, these guys seem cool. They mentioned their community. I went and joined. See online, there's usually a cost, like $30, $40 a month. See how it is. Then I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I went to one of their, what they call their X events, which isn't their main ones. It's like in the cities. And I like the people there. And I'm like, let me go to their main one. And I like the people there. And that's actually the big mastermind group I found was through that community. But I was in there for 3 years before the mastermind came. It wasn't day one, here's a mastermind.
Yeah. Got you. That's a good idea. Thank you for directing before additionally in there, because I was also thinking like I have a lot of projects in terms of building a community. I have a coaching business. I have a program that works specifically and helps entrepreneurs to build self-awareness, and actually using the podcast to create a community. And support in that way. I believe that's a powerful thing. I need to look into that. Thank you for the idea.
Definitely. There's plenty of people to do it. Pat Flynn does it. Tropical MBA does it. Let's see, Location Indie is another community I'm part of. So these are more in the travel entrepreneurship spaces. There's the other ones. There are e-commerce communities. Try to e-com podcasts. So I'm in one of those communities. There's communities for everything.
Cool. All right, we've touched so many things. This is a value-packed episode. I super love the conversation that we had. For wrapping up, I ask you to give our listeners an additional nugget of thought about what should they do right now, listening to this episode, to get the most out of 2021 for their business.
Okay, so again, it depends on where you are in your business, but I'm going to assume you haven't started yet. Let's say you're starting off and you want to do it. Just get started. Throw your website up there. So the tip is do it in WordPress. Go to Bluehost, sign up for a Bluehost account, click install WordPress. It'll take you 30 seconds. Go to a website called themeforest.net, buy a theme, upload it, change the text. You're done. You can do this in an afternoon. Launch your business. The biggest reason most people fail in business is because they never start. So I challenge you to spend the next 24 hours and throw up your website. Just do it. And I think that'll change the most amount of lives out there. Just start your website, throw it up.
Super. And for those who are having, let's say, a six-figure business or higher, what would you recommend for them to reflect upon or start looking at?
Yeah, so for that one, it's actually the opposite. It's start figuring out what part of your business generates the most of your income. You'll find the 80-20 principle applies, and cut out the 80% that's not, the 80% that's only generating 20% of your income. get rid of it, kill it, throw it away, and focus on that little bit that's doing it. It'll be a small dip in your income maybe for the first year, but the math that I share with everybody is if 20% is generating 80% of your income, take that 20% up to 40%, you now have 160% of your income, right? Just by going down by 20%. So yeah, that's what I recommend to somebody in the six-figure. Figure out what part is generating most of the income, cut out all the peripherals and focus on that.
Great. Thank you, Ray, for being with us, sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience. For everyone who is looking to discover what Ray does even deeper, I'll provide all the information in the description to this episode. Thank you, Ray, for being with us. I wish you a happy holiday. And yeah, thank you for being with us.
Alen, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.